good afternoon 104. This is one of several videos that will be posted for the week of May 11th. This is getting us through the last three concepts that you need to master in order to work on your final exam for this class. So for the week of May 11th, this is the first lecture, which is on 16th notes. So 16th notes can be found between pages 139 and 142. So before we take a look there, let's just take a look at what I've written on my whiteboard here. So 16th note is the last value that we're going to learn. It's the fastest value. It's twice as fast as those eighth notes that we've been doing. So a 16th note looks very similar to an eighth note, except for it has what's called two flags on that stem. So our eighth note had just one, our 16th note has two. Same thing with the rest. Instead of just having that one loop or one flag up there, our 16th note has two. So a 16th note, when we're working in a meter with a 4 on the bottom, is worth a quarter of the beat or fourth of the beat. So here's the most common way that we're going to see these 16th notes in our music. We can see them grouped or barred together just like we saw eighth notes. So when we have 4 of them together, here's my 1 and here's my and. We need 2 more subdivisions to be able to count or divide that beat into 4. The most common subdivisions used by musicians usually are the syllables E and ah. So we would say 1 E and a. So 1 E and a, 2 E and a, subdividing that beat. Sometimes we'll see a figure with an eighth note and then 2 16th notes after it. So just like we found with eighth notes, if there are 16th notes in a piece, you need to be subdividing to that smallest 16th the entire time. So my eighth note would get 1 and the E, so it gets 2 quarter of a beats equaling a half. The 16th would then get the and the next 16th would get an ah. So that is going to sound like 1 E and a, 1 E and a. Now with both of these, if you preferred saying the type of note, if you found that you do better counting half note, quarter, eighth notes, the same thing works here. 16, 16, 16, 16, say the type of word. Or here, type of note, 8, 16, 8, 16. Another great way to be able to practice these is to put your metronome on a fast beat. Have that click be the 16th note so that you're hearing 2 16th notes in an eighth. The third way that's most common to use the 16th note is this rhythm. And here comes that dot again. We've seen this dot on the side of notes throughout the semester. So I originally have an eighth note here, which would be a half of a beat. My dot on the side, remember, on the top or bottom it's the staccato. On the side, it's adding half of the original note value back again. So on the side, it's adding half of a half, which would be a quarter. And then here's my second bar there, making a 16th note here. There would be my other quarter of a beat. So 3/4 of the beat would get 1 E and, the last quarter of the beat would get ah. So when you're looking on page 139, the very first example that they have for you is actually in a meter of 3/8. So if I'm in a meter of 3/8, that's telling me that an eighth note is going to be worth 1 beat. So that means that a 16th note in this meter is going to be worth half a beat. Remember, with that 3/8 meter, essentially everything is doubled. So looking at my first example, the book gives you a nice job of writing in the counting there, and you can see how those 16th notes then are featured as half a beat, or focusing, turning basically into what we were calling eighth notes before. Let's take a look at the second example, the one by Godecki in the middle. So let's take a look at our rhythm there with the right hand. We've got 4 16ths, 2 eighths. So I would count that 1 E and a, 2 and. Subdividing 1 E and a, 2 E and a. So subdividing to those 16ths even on the eighth notes is going to help me be more precise. Your next measure, you've got an eighth, 2 16ths, 2 16ths, and an eighth. So I have 1 E and a, 2 E and a. So let's clap through the right hand of this second example, this Godecki example together. Here's our beat. 1 and 2 and 1 E and a 2 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2. Again, if you prefer to say the type of note it is, you could also count this as 16, 16, 8th, 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 16, 16, 8th, 16, 16, 16, 16, 8, 16, 8th. Your third example on page 139, Alouette, is a little bit trickier because here we get that dotted 8/16. So listen to, I'm going to play the melody for Alouette as I count it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. So that, I think, helps, especially with a familiar melody, to hear how that's working. So with these melodies on page 139, your main focus should be counting and clapping, and maybe doing some clapping together with coordination. These aren't ones that I think you need to spend a lot of time learning the notes or getting the coordination. They're just really good rhythm drills. The pieces that I do think are worth spending quite a bit of time on is I would take a look at a singing game on page 140. Notice it's in the key of C. No flats or sharps, but it does not lay in the key of C. You need to look at what your first letter name is and line it up with a corresponding finger. So as our pieces continue to get more difficult, they're not always going to lie right in position. This Old Man on page 141 is an excellent one to look at. One flat is giving you the key of F. Your left hand is spelled right in F. Notice your right hand is not. It's starting with a finger 4 on C. But the 16th notes should be very easy to count in this one. They're those basic subdivisions that we just talked about. German Dance is another excellent one to use a metronome on and feel the difference between the 1 E and a 2 E and a, the 16th versus the 8ths. The last two pieces that I'd like you to take a look at on page 142, Slavic sounds. Take a look at your key signature. This one is in minor. See if you can use what we worked on last week to figure out what your minor tonic is. You've got parallel motion, so this is an easy one to learn, a quick one to learn. Great one to work on that division between 16th notes and 8th notes. Czech folk song right below it is sitting in the key of B flat, so a little bit more of an unusual key. It has both hands, the left hand sitting in B flat, the right hand is not. Look at your first letter name, it's a D with finger 5. So as you find that hand position, you need to check your key signature for your flats. Good use of 16th notes here with a 1 E and a, so flipping those 16ths on the other end. 16th notes can be hard. Use a metronome, count out loud, do some clapping. Reach out, I'd love to do some practicing with you together. Please do make sure you master how to count these though and get comfortable with how they're appearing in the rhythm sequences, because you will find them on the choice pieces for your last exam of exam 3. So 16th notes, this should help you with your counting. Pages 139 through 142. And reach out if you have questions or any practice that you'd like to do together. I'd be happy to get together. Have fun.